Web3.tv.
We survived the traffic and, the heat outside earlier while waiting. So my name is Karen, and I'm your host tonight. And yes, I'm a trader too, which means just like you, I also lie awake at night whispering, Bitcoin, pump again. Maybe I'll sell this time. So I actually, prepared some things, but I'll just keep it simple tonight. So I want to introduce you tonight to chAtoshi.ai. The AI, a chat agent made for traders, by traders, built by the amazing Apta team. So what's Chatoshi? Chatoshi is, like your, if Siri and ChatGPT have a love child, but the difference is actually Chatoshi knows the difference between the bear market and a bull trap. And I have a lot of things to say about Chatoshi. However, I will let the heroes tell you more about it, okay? So before we dive into the live demo, let's welcome the real heroes behind Chatoshi, the data scientists, the data engineers, the brilliant minds behind Chatoshi, building it from scratch, turning caffeine and chaos into future of trading. Please welcome the Apta team.
Thanks, Karen. So it's not a one-man team. There are others in the audience, but I'm just giving the first presentation. Okay. I've got it, I think. It's okay, I'll stay. All right, so in today's presentation, I want to talk you through previewing the next evolution of crypto copilot agents. So that's quite a mouthful. So hopefully by the end of the presentation, I'm able to break it down to make sense of what this title actually means. But the real aim is we want to try and introduce you to Chatoshi. And as Karen mentioned, the basic idea is that we want it to be a tool as a one-point access for all your crypto needs. So what that means, in very, friendly terms, is the ChatGPT for crypto, but far, far more than that. It effectively wants to be a platform where you can come to this tool and ask simple information, or much more beyond that, things like insights, extract various alpha, or extract different kind of analytics, just using human natural language. But before we properly go into that, I want to give you a bit of an insight into the technology behind Chatoshi and why it is so powerful. Very briefly, just to introduce my team, I am Vatsal, the CTO of Apta, which is an AI spin-out from the University of Cambridge. So let's take a look at the scope for what we're going to talk about today. So as a first step, I want to establish the foundation and introduce to you the technology which powers Apta, or our product, Chatoshi. And the idea is we introduce something called the preemptive agentic architecture. Once I've established the foundation of how the technology behind Chatoshi works, I would like to introduce you to some of our live agents. Which agents power Chatoshi itself, and what kind of things can you already do with Chatoshi if you were to use the app or the web application? Once we take a look at a snapshot of what these live agents are, I want to bring you up to speed into what agents are in development underneath the hood for Chatoshi to make it even more powerful beyond what it is today. And finally, I want to end the presentation by giving you a long vision of where we see Chatoshi to be in the future, maybe a few months down the line. Okay, so let's get into the somewhat technical part of the presentation. This is the only technical slide. Everything else is more of a demo. So Everyone, I guess, are familiar now with LLMs. Everyone nowadays in the day-to-day life probably use things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Mistral, DeepSeek, and whatnot. Hanuman, I heard recently. So, but we believe that despite these models being great, and coming from an NLP background myself, these models at the end of the day are what we call autoregressive language models. This means at the heart of how they operate, all they do is, given a historical sequence of words, they predict the next most likely word that should follow from that sentence. And because of this behavior, they give them very strong language capabilities. But that's kind of where they're limited. They're designed for language, not inherently designed to perform reasoning or deep analytics. So the way, I guess, the AI community solve this problem to be able to do more complicated tasks is they leverage something called agentic flow. And this means the LLM does not act in isolation. It's part of a greater ecosystem of modules. And we apply this ecosystem to the crypto domain for Satoshi and adapt it to make it what we call preemptive. So let's take a look at this example question, a very simple question, to understand how this architecture works. Let's say someone comes to Satoshi and asks a very simple question: is Pepe up? So the first layer of our system is the LLM. The LLM acts as what we call the ears of our system and also the mouth of the system. So what we mean by the ears of the system, it listens to what the user asks and understands the user's intent. But it does not respond straight away. Instead, it behaves as a router. And when behaving as a router, it decides amongst a suite of different tools underneath the hood, which most people now refer to as agents, which one should be triggered to be able to answer that question. So in this second layer, the router decides to route, in this case, to a live market agent. This live market agent can be the brain to be able to answer this question. The live market agent acts on the question and operates over our data layer, as bespoke crypto data layer, to try and fetch the relevant information to answer that question. And once it's done its processing, got the response, it sends the output back to the LLM. And because the LLM is a great natural language communicator, the LLM is like, okay, the question was, is Pepe up? This is what the agent is telling me. Let me just write it back in a nice way to the user. So the high-level idea is, we are still using the LLM, but just as a communicator, an interface with the user. All the hard work is being done under the hood by these agents. So what really matters are the agents themselves. How do they operate and what agents do we have? And the way we see it at Apta is when we design each agent is designed for a very bespoke purpose, one functionality. Agents could include, for example, influencer validator, live market, coin health scorer, blockchain explorer, and many other such agents. So next, I would like to take a look at what agents do we actually have right now inside Satoshi if you were to use it. Because this will dictate what are the functionalities that you can do with Satoshi to use it effectively for yourself. Okay, so the agents we have include a news and sentiment agent. This means you can query about live news up to the current minute and sentiment associated with various different tokens and other topics. We have a crypto fundamentals agent. This agent knows questions like what's the difference between a hot wallet and a cold wallet, and various other facts that you might want to know about the system. We have a Twitter and socials agent. This agent is able to access information over different social media platforms like Twitter, Telegram, and YouTube. We have a token information agent. This is a simple agent. This allows you to access information like what's the price of a coin right now? What's this market cap? Can you tell me the top 5 gaming coins? Which coins have moved the most in the last week? Which ones are 80% down from the all-time high? This is what the token information agent can handle. Then getting a bit more exciting, we have a blockchain explorer agent. This is a bit more in its infancy, but what this enables you to do is, like over certain chains, currently supported EVM and Solana, it allows you to ask in natural language questions like, can you tell me what's the status of this transaction? Who are the top holders of Satoshi, for example? Then we get into, the more analytical agents. There's the quant and alpha agent. This allows you to perform technical analysis on various different tokens to see how they perform according to various technical indicators. But the high-level idea behind all these agents and why we're able to do so much better than generic systems is because all the heavy lifting is done in the background. When you focus on a certain domain, you know what the users care about, and you can cater to those demands in the background and achieve very low latency when people ask complicated analytical questions. So just to give a few visual diagrams of what some of these agents look like, here is an example, if you squint your eyes, I guess for some people at the back, about what we call the news and sentiment agent. The query here is, what is the latest crypto news? And what our system does, it gives you a digest of the latest crypto news up to the minute about the topic you might be interested in, includes all the references embedded directly inside the text itself. And beyond that, it also even scrapes through the over Twitter to identify relevant tweets to the topic you might be interested in. And for you to be able to cross-reference, all those tweets are embedded directly in the chat response. And we will see a demo of this later. And what this means is that it enables a user to use the system as a one-point access. You don't have to flick between lots of different screens. You can stick to this screen, see the full Twitter feed of all the relevant news relevant to the query you are asking about. Next, I want to give an example of a more complicated question. Here the question is, give me some coins which have increased by at least 10% in the last week, but have a market cap of 1 billion USD. Now, this is a bit more of a complicated question because someone's asking the system to filter according to a very specific criteria. And our system is able to give a very multimodal output with high accuracy. It gives all the different coins which satisfy this criteria, ordered by market cap, and tells you the price change percentage in a very neat table. And beyond that, someone can click on any of these coins and find additional information. You can find the price history about them, market cap, trading volume, explorers, and various other pieces of important information people might expect to know about any token. And all of this is just through natural language when a human asks the question. Another example is when someone can ask over influencer data, like who are the top American influencers? As we've got that data in our backend, and we've got this influencer agent is able to query this information to fetch this information directly to the user. And once again, anyone can click on any of these influencers to see detailed influencer report cards, which give you further information about the influencer, like the gender, where the location they're based in, the language they speak. Getting a bit more exciting, this was what I was referring to earlier as a technical analysis agent. You can ask questions like, what has better chart signals, Hedera or Dogecoin? And what our system returns is a short digest text telling you what the technical analysis indicators indicate about the token. Is it bearish, is it bullish, is it neutral? And then embeds these actually very useful graphs a lot of traders might use in their day-to-day life, which show things like MACD, RSI, Bollinger Bands, and many other such analyses. Beyond that, technical indicators are useful in many situations, but people want to know how correct are they in their predictions. So we do also, side by side, embedded in the chat, provide this backtest analysis, which shows how correct your technical indicators were when they were used in the past as indicators of how bullish, bearish, and neutral a certain token is. And finally, as a quick snapshot, this is an example of what is the status of the transaction and given a certain hash, transaction hash. And a system is able to easily give a quick answer, in this case based on an EVM chain. And we give another example of the on-chain explorer here, agent, where the question is, who are the top holders of chAtoshi? And once again, it pulls out all the top holders, the wallet contract addresses, and various other bits of important information. So my aim really from showing these examples is for you to kind of get a feel of what the wide variety of different features are incorporated into chAtoshi, and how maybe you can start seeing the vision that this can act as a single point of access to a very different number of users. They could be newbies in the space, they could be experienced traders, but the main idea is we want to democratize access to these different agents using just natural language. Typically, these kind of functionalities might be ring-fenced to an elite set of users who might have financial skills, programming skills to be able to query the blockchain, and various other skills which puts them ahead of the counterparts. And now with chAtoshi, you can just use human language to try and get the same insights as those people who have those skill sets. Okay, so that's now. I want to give a quick glimpse into what are some of the upcoming agents. There are many, many agents in the pipeline, but of course for in the interest of time, I will pick just a few for this presentation. So in the short term, one aspect we want to try and incorporate, and this is where we start seeing ourselves very different from generic tools, is getting very, very detailed information for newbies being onboarded into the system. If I gave chAtoshi to, let's say, my mum, the first question she asked was, which Bitcoin should I buy? So it was not the ideal question for our system, and you can see there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community. So in these kind of questions, we want to be able to educate the users of what actually crypto is and guide them along the right lines. And often, the reason people are coming on, they want to invest some money into the space. So as a simple question, if someone comes onto the space, they might want to be guided into what might be a sensible portfolio to start with. Nothing particularly intelligent, but basically try and match the risk appetite. This could be like being conservative to very speculative investments. And then this gives kind of detailed information. What kind of things should you be looking out for? Why isn't that investment conservative? Because you have this fraction of stable coins, you have this fraction of more volatile assets. So these kind of dashboards and in-depth information can help guide the user coming to use the system in the first place. Another agent we're looking to incorporate, and in fact is already in place if you try the app today, is something we call the KOL calls backtesting. Now we can use, for example, chAtoshi to ask very simple questions like, can you tell me what has been the win rate of Alex Becker? I hear this dude on YouTube all day making, so buy this coin, buy that coin, buy that coin. How correct has this guy actually been in the past? So our aim is for all the different KOLs, key opinion leaders, to give those statistics. So beyond that, we'll tell you at what fraction of the calls that guy made, how many of those tokens actually went up in price in different time frames, in 1 day, 3 days, 7 day, 14 day. And beyond that, we will tell you, as a person who listens to a call from any of these people, what's the average time actually takes to hit the peak for that token. But the high-level point I want you to take away is the heavy lifting has been done in the background. And once again, you're able to get this very deep insight from the system using natural language of simply what's the win rate of any influencer by asking chAtoshi. Okay, so one, I guess, agent we want to incorporate, and I think many people have asked about it, is it's sometimes far more convenient to speak rather than type. So we are incorporating, and very soon we'll be looking forward to deploying a spoken version of chAtoshi, where you can just speak to it intuitively, it can pause and understand, you don't have to click any buttons, and respond to you in different personalities. As being in, I guess, in the Solana chain, we do have different personalities. You can have a serious personality that people prefer. You can have a funny personality, and different kind of other accents that might be of interest to the user. But that's more on the fun side, but also very convenient. If you're driving and you want to get insights, ask questions to chAtoshi, you can just have it up and speak to it to get the same responses. So that was a very, very quick, small number of agents we're looking to incorporate in the near future. I want to give an idea of what's the vision for the long-term roadmap for agent expansion. So one aspect we want to look into is an execution agent. We want people to be able to ask questions like, okay, when Bitcoin crosses 100K, can you make sure you buy this much of Bitcoin and sell when it hits 80K? Or you want to be able to incorporate your wallet integration in the same place. And the same idea is now that because you have this execution agent directly embedded into your system, you don't have to go to other platforms to do these actions. You can interact with everything in one place itself. That's pretty scary. Okay, so the next agent we're looking to incorporate is the education agent. So I touched upon this before. Education is a very wide field, and I think it's a prediction across several pieces of analyses that we've read that crypto expects a huge onboarding of new users to come into the space. And if you want to capture that audience, we want to make sure the process is seamless and easy for them as possible. The crypto is complicated in many different ways, and there's lots of misinformation. So we want to make sure we can guide the user very easily. They should be able to ask questions like, what is this? How do I do this? How do I make a swap? And all these tutorials should be embedded directly in the chat to guide the user exactly how they can make these processes in a safe way, legal way, complying with all the different standards, without any confusion or listening to random people in Telegram groups. And another agent we're looking to incorporate is the advanced on-chain agent. This aims to be looking at what we're looking to incorporate is 4 petabytes worth of data to start with from the Solana blockchain, which will allow us to analyze various different aspects of the chain. You can now track, for example, if there's artificial pumping of a certain token or the trading volume by buying and selling the same wallet, or if there's sandwiching going on, and various other forms of foul behavior for certain tokens or certain wallets on the chain. And once again, accessing all of this from just natural language. Okay, so that was the long vision. I just want to play a quick video demoing what Satoshi actually feels like when you experience it. Because I feel this really hits home and makes you realize how easy it is for anyone to use to ask just about anything from the tool, which is kind of the target for chAtoshi. So the question being asked here, I might be a naive trader, is which meme coins are more than 80% down from their all-time high and have a market cap of at least 100 million USD? Because to me, as a naive trader, I might think these kind of coins are very low from the all-time high, but they have high market caps, so maybe they're going to bounce back at some point. But I just want to see at this point, get the information. It's very tricky for me to get the information otherwise from other tools. I need maybe SQL querying programming skills to be able to query this data, or I'll have to ask someone. So here you can see Satoshi actually returns the table of the coins which satisfy this criteria. And then we have these kind of report cards, which for each of these coins which satisfy that criteria, you can see all the information you want. You can click to get further information, in this case, see the price history, and indeed you can kind of see it's 80% down from its all-time high. So it seems roughly right. So maybe when doing this question, Floki piqued my interest. And I query further about it. Is there been any news about, let's see, Floki? I want to see if the system knows anything about Floki. And what's happening here is the system now triggers the news and sentiment agent to answer this question. And here, as we can see in the digest, we've got various web news articles being pulled together and summarized about latest news about Floki. And besides actually giving just the web articles, it's integrated information from various different places and even tracked what is, for example, the sentiment history. So it tracked the sentiment of these articles related to Floki and giving this in-depth information. Further, these Twitter sources are also embedded, which inform what the news has been about Floki. And this Twitter feed is kind of directly there in the chat for you to scroll through, rather than you having to navigate to Twitter anyway and trying to identify what is the news related to Floki. Okay, so I can see Twitter agent is inside there. Let me ask something else. Which coins have had the most increase in mentions on Twitter today? Now, this is actually a very cool question. I'm literally trying to ask which coins are dominating the mind share. It's very, very hard to actually get this information directly from anywhere else. And as we can see, as we expect, Bitcoin's at the top, simply because it's the highest market cap coin. Then Fartcoin leads very closely in terms of mind share. And once again, we can see certain tweets which have been discussing these coins. Okay, so Bitcoin's at the top. Someone might ask, should I buy Bitcoin? In these kind of questions, what Satoshi does is it performs the technical analyses and integrates all the information directly in the chat. So these are the screenshots you saw earlier. You've got the MACD, you can switch the multimodal forms of output to different forms and see the various different types of analyses that someone can do just using Satoshi. So hopefully you got an idea from that. There's a versatile number of purposes that you can use Satoshi for. And every day we're increasing the number of features, and we showed just a few of them earlier in the presentation. Okay, so the main point to hit home is we want to make Satoshi a tool, not to be noble in everything, but to be a tool such that anyone can use to not be guided by misinformation in the field. Especially in the crypto field, it's kind of renowned for charlatans, scams, misinformation, and very little detail about what's actually going on. So by this tool, it can act as an accurate resource for people to query anything about the system that they might be interested in. This could be people for education, traders, or just analysis and insights people might want to know about tokens and various other entities in the field. And so far, what we've got is a web application to try Chatoshi and also the Chatoshi app. And our hope is that we get people to try it out, give us feedback, both good and bad at this point. We want to be dictating our next steps based on what people like and want from our system. So thanks, everyone, and do try it out.
Okay, so that's so cool. I think, I like the Chatoshi personality. So there are actually like 3 personality right now in our app that is live. So the serious mode, and the serious mode is just like serious, smart, serious. It's like Gordon Ramsay of trading, minus the kitchen insult. And I think the one that Vatsal has been showing is the witty mode. So it's sassy, you know, like all the answer has some spice in it. Last week, we were in Solana Crossroads, and what they actually like there is the Trump mode. Because, you know, it says like, beautiful chart, huge opportunity. You'll be so rich, it's disgusting. And it sounds like Trump. I don't know how to, you know, mimic Trump. I'm not there yet. And if Trump mode is wrong, it wasn't me. It was the market. It's a scam. Investigate, you know. You really have to try it, so download it. On the side note though, chAtoshi is still in beta, which means it's already smarter than the 90% of your trading gurus in Instagram. But it's learning too. So if you spot a bug, maybe, you know, it says, buy Habibi coin at 100x leverage. Don't panic. I don't want you to tweet like, hey chAtoshi, your AI said I should short on Sol. Now I'm short a kidney too. So just report the bug. In every answer, there's a flag there. Just flag it so that we can improve it, because we're building this together. So your feedback helps chAtoshi improve, because, you know, in crypto, it's evolving. So now let's call in Vyas to, you know, tell us more about the project.
Thanks, Karen, everyone. Yes, I do look the same as the previous presenter. I am his twin brother, Vyas. But what I'm going to talk about differently today is the title of the talk, Ahead of the AI Curve, Innovating at the Edge, where we're looking at how do we build things today which keep us ahead of the fast-moving AI industry. So, to keep introduction short, because Vatsal has already introduced Apta and chAtoshi, I'm Vyas Raina, the Chief Science Officer at Apta, and today I'll be presenting with Akash, who can join me, as one of the AI founding engineers at Apta. You know, at Apta we are building domain-specific agentic code pilots, with the first application, and our favorite application, being chAtoshi, which has been described in lots of detail already. So, you know, chAtoshi is using cutting-edge technology. But a question we often get asked as AI engineers is that AI is such a fast-paced field. How do you keep up? There are new features, new models being deployed almost every week. What are you building today which will keep you ahead of the AI curve tomorrow? So, in a bid to answer this question, today Akash and I will present to you what we believe are the next biggest things in AI research. So bear with us at times, it may become a bit technical, but we hope we can prepare you for what we think is going to be the biggest thing of 2026 or even end of 2025. So you're ahead of the curve as well that way. So a brief outline for the talk. There are going to be 4 main parts. First, I'm going to very quickly to ensure that we are all aligned in our understanding of LLMs, review where they came from and where they are today, so we all know how they operate. Then, I will use this as an opportunity to highlight a major issue with LLMs. They are these extremely large, difficult to control, I would say monolithic black box systems. As a user, it's very hard for me to make them behave exactly as I want. And so then I will use this as ammunition to show how model steerability, a new topic in AI research, is a solution to opening this black box and giving back more control to the user. Great. Then thirdly, I will hand over to Akash, who is going to remind us of how the entire AI industry as a whole has moved away from solely relying on large language models, but adopting something called the agentic architecture, which Vatsal described for chAtoshi earlier. But Akash will highlight how this agentic architecture is insufficient when you want to scale to millions of agents, a future we all want to have, where everyone has their own agent but interacts with one monolithic system. And the solution he's going to propose is going to be called MCP, Model Context Protocol, an upcoming and exciting new thing some people may have heard of, coming right out of their research, very fresh now, and Akash will explain how this will solve the problem of scaling. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with a brief review of the timeline. I don't want to spend too much time here because I think we are all familiar with LLMs and they've suddenly taken the world by storm. But I do want to remind you that the first functional deep learning systems, the kind of precursor to these LLMs, the operation behind them, came in 2009, so not that long ago. And it was only by 2024 where we had these more generalist, multimodal, powerful large language models, such as ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, Claude, and many others, as we are probably using day to day. Probably ChatGPT is dominating the usage right now. So these LLMs are great. But what I want to remind everyone of, so we are on the same page, slightly technical, is how these large language models are trained. Essentially, there are two key steps. First is called self-supervised learning. Here, the language model is given access to a large wealth of information, specifically sentences from the internet. And they're trained to predict every word in each sentence one by one. What this means is that when the language model has given a new sentence, it's able to complete it to find the missing words. Effectively, it's a very good probabilistic predictor of missing words and autocomplete. And this is great. This kind of training gives the language model a good understanding of language. But at this point, it can't quite follow human instructions. So when me and you interact with ChatGPT, we often say to it, can you do this, can you do that? Just this pre-training step doesn't allow the language model to do that. So the second step of training is called instruction tuning. As kind of indicated at the bottom of this slide, instruction tuning is where the language model is further trained on question-answer pairs. Here, the language model is given lots and lots of different natural language tasks. It can be summarization, translation, comprehension. And once it's trained to be able to do question and answering on these different tasks, the model has the ability to both predict language very well, but also understand the user intent and question and follow their instruction. And that's what we have with ChatGPT in 2022 and all the popular LLMs like Mistral and Gemini. Great, but there is still a problem. And this is the problem I want to highlight. As a user, when I use any of these language models, I can't make them do what I want. And I want to illustrate this with an example. So when thinking of giving this talk back in Cambridge in UK, I thought I would start with a very benign sentence. I thought I would say, I am attending Token 2049 in Dubai. But I wanted to make it a bit more humorous. So I went to ChatGPT, like anyone else would, and asked ChatGPT, can you make it funny? And it did. It said, coming to Token 2049 to see if Web3 can fix my commitment issues. That was a bit too strong for me. I didn't like it, so I asked ChatGPT, can you make it a little less funny? And this time it says, I'm attending Token 2049 in Dubai, partly for the blockchain insights, mostly for the air-conditioned conference halls. And I was like, oh, the fall was kind of flat. It was not a great joke. So can you make it a bit more funny? Now, you can see from this to and fro exchange, it's very difficult for me as a user to get the exact level of the funniness in the output as I desire. I have no real control other than the natural language input I have the input. And so the point I want to emphasize here, as a user, I can only influence the output using my input natural language and nothing else. I don't really have that much control. It's a bit vague, it's a bit ambiguous, and I really struggled to get exactly what I wanted, so I didn't even use this sentence in the end. But luckily, there is a solution. In research, there's this whole idea of model steerability. Imagine in the future, we have a language model or a large language model, which not only accepts natural language as the input, but can also accept specific tunable values of different properties. For example, imagine I could set on a scale of 1 to 10 exactly how funny I want the output to be. And that'd be great, because then I could repeat this for different properties, such as casualness or optimism, or any other property I care about. And this is exactly what we mean by model steerability. I don't have to fiddle around with my natural language input. I can set the exact value of a property I care about and be confident it has the output in the nature I desire. And that's it. That's what we mean by opening that black box, giving more control to the user. Now, the next slide is going to be very slightly technical, but I think some people find it interesting to know. How is this actually achieved? Well, a large language model has two parts to it. There's the embedding stage, followed by the rest of the language model, and that I will call the decoder. The embedder is responsible for mapping the natural language input to what is called a mathematical vector, effectively an embedding per se, which represents that natural language. On the diagram, on this 2D graph here, you can see it as the orange graph, the orange arrow. Now, what's interesting about this 2D space, or this mathematical vector space, is that there are certain directions that align with certain concepts. For example, funniness, or optimism, or casualness, and various others. And now, if I want to control how much of an output I have of a particular property, I simply have to move my orange arrow more in that direction. And that's great. That's exactly what we wanted with our tunable values. So this is kind of giving us an insight into how this controllable LLM can be achieved. So do look out for these kind of LLMs. I think likely to hit AI products probably by the end of this year. But now I'm going to hand over to Akash, who's going to give us insight into another big issue around why we as an industry adopted the agentic architecture and how that's not enough when we want millions of agents. Akash.
Thanks, VS. So now we know how to steer the text generated by LLMs. Let's shift gears to what we know now as AI agents and how they're used to automate workflows. These have been developed by the likes of OpenAI, DeepMind, DeepSeek, and here at Apta as well. So before I talk about what to expect in the future, let's just touch base with where we are right now. And to do this, I'll illustrate this with a problem that we call the artisan problem. So I just arrived from Cambridge, and I heard that the Artisan is a good restaurant in Dubai, and I'd like to check for the availability of this tonight, but of course using AI. Let's see how ChatGPT would have fared back in 2022 when it had just come out. So, as the previous presentations have mentioned, large language models work by generating text probabilistically. And so internally, when I would have asked ChatGPT this question, is there any availability at the Artisan restaurant tonight? It would flip a weighted coin, and 70% of the time it would say, yes, there is space. Seems a bit arbitrary. Where did this come from? Very likely it's from the training data on the internet, where the Artisan was open 70% of the time in the past. But if you're lucky, ChatGPT might say, hey, I'm still learning, and I don't actually have access to the live booking data at the Artisan. And so this is the crux of the problem. LLMs back then didn't actually have access to the tools. And so the big companies like OpenAI, they realized this, and they developed what we now know as AI agents. And I'll explain, I'll just give an example of how this works in our system. So the analogy that I want you to remember from the last presentation, as Vatsol mentioned, is that the LLM acts as the ears and the mouth of the system, while the various tools are like the different parts of your brain processing it. And Vatsol done a very good job explaining it, so I'll just give a brief overview of what's going on over here. So we pass in the question to our agent. The LLM then listens to what I'm saying, breaks it down into various parts of the questions, and it routes it to our tools. And the key tool that we care about here is this restaurant API, which checks for the live availability at the Artisan and then gives a response. And once the various tools or the different parts of the brain have done the processing, it passes on this structured information back to the LLM, and the LLM gives an output in natural language. In this case, unfortunately, the Artisan is fully booked. But these agents have been around for just under a year now, and they're very cool. They can automate workflows. But let's say I wanted to add, like VS had mentioned, millions of agents or millions of tools. Then we run into a scaling issue. And there are two main challenges that we face with scaling. The first is fragmentation. There's so many tools out there with no consistent way of operating them. When you want to add a new tool to your system, you suddenly have to retrain your whole setup, which can be time-consuming, expensive, and unreliable. And the second issue is privacy. There's so many companies out there with a lot of tools, a lot of data that they don't want to hand over to third parties. And this could be, for example, because they're dealing with private user data. And so to solve this, we're going to use what's called the Model Context Protocol, or MCP for short. This has been researched in the AI community, and we're here to bring it to the Web3 community. Before I dive into how this works, the key picture that I want in mind. So we're all in the Web3 community where decentralization is an axiom for us. And this often comes at the expense of standardization. And so it's actually quite remarkable to see that such a thing like MCP exists, where we can have both standardization and decentralization together. So let's demonstrate this with our favorite artisan problem. Just as a reminder, we have problem, it gets fed to the LLM, and we call the restaurant API. But let's say that the artisan now, to take a decentralized approach, they decide to use MCP. So the first thing that they must do is standardize their tool. So MCP defines a protocol. It defines a consistent schema for the inputs and outputs that you'd expect in a tool. In this case, a tool to check for the live availability at the artisan. And what this means is that tools now become plug and play for your system. You don't have to retrain your system to get used to this new tool. And so this solves the fragmentation issue. So now let's see how we can put this in our decentralized execution framework. So again, as a reminder, we have an LLM that accesses the restaurant API. And what makes this centralized is that the restaurant API is hosted by the agent. To make it decentralized, the restaurant API needs to be hosted by the artisan themselves. And so for this, they require an MCP server. So now in this new setup, we have the LLM that calls the MCP tool based off of the standard schema that we've given it. And then the MCP tool calls the MCP server. This is hosted by the artisan. It then checks for the availability at the artisan, and the result is fed back to our system. And it continues its business as usual. So so MCP is very useful for this, and what's nice about it is that it allows our system to be agnostic to the internals of the tool. And so just to recap, VS has taught us how we can steer LLMs and the advancements in that, and I've shown you how we can scale effectively using MCP. So let's see how we take this approach in our very own chAtoshi. So chAtoshi is our world-class Web3 AI copilot. It's built with bespoke, centralized experts, and it delivers you the insights that you need very quickly. But we want to take this to the next level. We want to reach the moon. And so we're going to use the two approaches that we've talked about. The plan is to improve the persona of chAtoshi using LLM steerability, and we're partnering with various providers of MCP servers to deliver you more features. The ones that Vatsal has mentioned, as well as things like yield management, more trading strategies, and deeper on-chain data. We're very excited to show you this in the future. But for now, let's open the floor to questions.
Thanks, everyone. So do look out for these two new things. Yeah, any questions?
Brilliant presentation. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. With the example of the artisan, if the artisan didn't have the MPC server, then would it not be able to answer the question accurately?
That's a good question. So let's say, so in the previous setup, if we have access to the artisan data, then we would be able to answer this question. But as always, a backup, let's say we didn't have access to the artisan data, then you can always do a web search to see if this data is available.
So you would check that on booking.com or whatever they use, table.com, whatever, to confirm if there's actual availability.
Yeah, yeah. But the problem is that in those cases is that you don't know how reliable it's going to be. And so the best case scenario is indeed that you partner up with the artisan to meet in the middle somewhere.
If it doesn't have that ability, it should output, sorry, I cannot answer this question. I don't have access to artisan. Would that be a valid?
You'd hope.
You'd hope.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think you've actually touched on something very interesting, and I think it's probably one of the biggest business opportunities probably in the next 3 years, is companies that don't build MCP servers are going to get left behind in advertising. Imagine you ask ChatGPT, what's a good restaurant? Which one has good availability today? It's naturally going to show the ones for which it has API access. If your restaurant's not keeping up to date with what everyone else is doing, you're not going to appear in these LLMs. So this is what everyone talks about as LLM-EO, the new version of SEO, search engine optimization. You want to optimize your businesses so they appear in LLM searches. So anyone with spare capacity, start building this now. And I think it'll be a billion-dollar company in 3 years.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, any other questions?
Hi.
Hey.
Okay. I had a bit more deeper question.
Please go ahead.
More on the AI. As we understand, the first paper written was on the cybernetics. I think it was Pitts was the name I remember. So I'm just thinking about that and then how we have progressed on the AI. So right now, what I understand from your description is AI is more like there are databases, or let's call it our human experience memories, and the system is just picking up and coming back based on the probability of what we are inputting. Do you see a scenario where it is able to mimic how a cognition or whatever happens in the human brain, which I'm sure it's called the AGI, where not only just stores information, but it also stores information in a way of certain awareness of its own. It has, of course, it needs to have a self for it to be aware. So what is your thinking about that?
Yeah, if I may start first, I think you're touching on quite a philosophical question over here, whether we can have consciousness in AI. But my general approach, and I think kind of reflecting something which Jan LeCun said, the CEO of Meta and one of the 4 founders of deep learning, he said the current technology does not mimic how the brain thinks. It's trying to basically hacking its way together to answer a question and convincingly. And I think agentic AI itself already solves the problem around probabilistic models trying to answer your question based on probabilities, but instead going by facts, which it gets from APIs. But if you want to mimic what humans do and have consciousness, I think people are in industry, in academia, have proposed various different architectures which they think are simulating the way the brain thinks. I don't know if you remember any specific ones.
Yeah, good question, yeah. So like the way current deep learning models are developed is, like you might know, using artificial neural networks. And the idea behind that is to try and simulate how the brain works. And like VS was touching upon, there are more architectures that are out there to try and get closer and closer. And that's how they compute what's going on. The actual learning process uses what's known as backpropagation, where you calculate the gradients and you try to fine-tune the little knobs in your neural network. And that's not how the brain learns. And so that's where a lot of research is going into to try and see if we can mimic a bit more about how the brain learns that way.
Okay, wonderful.
Any other questions from anyone? If not, pump it. I'm joking.
Thank you, our, the data engineers and AI scientists, the best. And fun fact, for those of you who doesn't know, we also have our chAtoshi coin. Market cap, $2 million. Liquidity, $800,000. That's kind of like 40% of the market cap, right? We have 2,300 brave holders. Are you one of them? Yeah, okay, not yet a holder, but you guys are gonna hold because, why hesitate? Like 6 months from now, you're gonna regret it like you regret not having Bitcoin in 2011, right? So download it, use the app. Remember, smart traders don't pray for pumps. We prepare for dumps. And all right, that's all for tonight. Remember, market will rise, markets will fall, but if you keep learning and leveling up, and maybe a little help from chAtoshi.ai, you will always stay in the game. Thanks for coming, and we have drinks and food outside. Okay?
Web3.dev